Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Air Vice Marshal Steve Roberton. Today, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Milne Bay. By mid-1942, the Japanese had swept all before them on their way through Southeast Asia. In Papua, they were fighting deep in the jungle along the Kokoda Trail, and by mid-August had advanced as far as Isurava. To support this advance, late on the night of the 25th of August 1942, a force of 2,000 Japanese Marines landed at Milne Bay on the southeastern tip of Papua. They intended to capture the Allied airstrips protecting seaward passages to the east, with orders to smash to pieces the enemy lines and take the aerodrome by storm. Initially, the Japanese met with their accustomed success. Supported by 2 light tanks, they advanced steadily inland towards the airfields. The Allies, however, had been forewarned of the landing and had heavily reinforced the garrison. Milne Bay was said to have had 2 seasons, the wet and the rainy. The battle that followed raged through incessant rain, ankle-deep mud, thick jungle, malaria-ridden swamps, and pitch-black nights. By late August, the Australians had regained the initiative, forcing the Japanese back along the coast, and by the 7th of September, enemy forces had been evacuated by sea. Of the 2,800 Japanese who had landed at Milne Bay, only 1,300 made the evacuation. Some 750 lay dead around the bay, while others died attempting to escape overland to Boona. More than 160 Australians lost their lives, including 36 who were captured and executed. 14 Americans were also killed, as well as 59 Papuans. Milne Bay was the first decisive defeat of a Japanese offensive on land in the Second World War and a major Allied victory. British Field Marshal Sir William Slim later reflected, Australian troops had, at Milne Bay in New Guinea, inflicted on the Japanese their first undoubted defeat on land. Some of us may forget that of all the Allies, it was the Australian soldiers who first broke the invincibility of the Japanese. The victory at Milne Bay owed much to the Royal Australian Air Force, whose Kitty Hawks sank enemy landing craft and shipping, destroyed stockpiles of supplies, and suppressed enemy troop movements. The sinking of enemy barges, in particular, cut supply lines and prevented the Japanese from performing outflanking manoeuvres around the coastline. Such was the importance of numbers 75 and 76 squadrons that Major General Cyril Claus, the commander of Allied forces at Milne Bay, praised their untiring and courageous work, which has earned the admiration of all. Today, we remember those who fought at Milne Bay. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. This evening, we warmly welcome Group Captain Bruce Chandler, retired, representing the Air Force Association, and Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching a broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Ballarat Christian College from Sebastopol in Victoria. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament. Flowers of the forest, wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Gordon Norman Andrews. Gordon Andrews was born in Mildura in Victoria on the 20th of September 1913 to Henry and Louisa Andrews. He grew up in the family home on 16th Street in Renmark, South Australia, and attended schools locally. During his school years, he met and became fast friends with Morris Davidson, known as Ted. As a young adult, Andrews moved to a property on Railroad Avenue with his brother George, where they worked as orchardists. The rich red soil of the riverland lent itself to growing citrus fruit and wine grapes, although the brothers were primarily concerned with the former. Andrews met Eleanor Millich, a native of Loxton, a town near Renmark, and the two began a relationship. Davidson met a young lady by the name of Olive Wood. These two couples would have spent many of their evenings and weekends together. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, Andrews and Davidson enlisted together on the 11th of November 1939 for service with the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. That this was also Remembrance Day would not have been lost on the young men. They were sent to Adelaide, where they joined the 2nd 10th Battalion at Wavell Showgrounds, and after initial training in the Adelaide Hills, the battalion moved to New South Wales, training at Greta Camp and then Ingleburn. When Andrews and Davidson were granted pre-embarkation leave on the 4th of March, they both returned to Renmark. They had arranged with their partners to have a dual wedding. The next day at the Congregational Church at Medindi, Andrews married Eleanor and Ted married Olive. The leave period would have passed all too quickly, and soon Andrews and Davidson found themselves back at camp at Ingleburn. On the 5th of May, the 2nd 10th Battalion embarked from Sydney on the transport ship Mauretania, initially bound for the Middle East. With the fall of France, however, the transport ship was diverted to the United Kingdom. After disembarking at Gourock in Scotland in mid-June, the 2nd 10th Battalion was sent to Lopcombe Corner near Salisbury in England. And over the following months, the battalion conducted a busy regime of training. October saw the 2nd 10th Battalion move to Colchester, and the following month, with the threat of German invasion now over, the men embarked for service in the Middle East, arriving at the end of December. In April 1941, the 2nd 10th Battalion was sent to Tobruk, where the men took part in halting German attacks during what became known as the Siege of Tobruk. In August, the 2nd 10th was withdrawn from Tobruk and sent to Palestine for rest and training, and in September the battalion was sent to Syria as part of the Allied garrison of that country. When Japan entered the war in December, the Australian government pressed for a recall of the 7th Division. As a result, the 2nd 10th Battalion embarked for home in early February 1942. And arriving in Australia in mid-March, the men were sent to Kilcoy in Queensland to train and reorganise before being deployed to New Guinea. On the 17th of April, Andrews and Davidson went absent without leave, presumably to see their wives. It would be the last time the couples were together. Both men returned, were severely reprimanded and lost 24 days' pay. The 2nd 10th Battalion left Australia at the beginning of August, disembarking at Milne Bay on the 12th. The battalion, along with the other units of the Milne Force, commanded by Major General Cyril Clowes, had been sent to defend 3 airstrips from an impending Japanese attack. Japanese forces began landing on the northern shore of Milne Bay on the night of the 25th of August. The 61st Battalion put up a brave resistance before being forced to withdraw. 2 days later, the Japanese forced the 61st and the 25th Battalions to withdraw to the Gama River, where they were relieved by the 2nd 10th Battalion. That afternoon, the 2nd 10th advanced and soon came under fire from advancing Japanese Marines. In a night of confused fighting, Andrews was killed, one of 43 members of the battalion killed during that battle. The Battle of Milne Bay lasted until the 7th of September, when surviving Japanese forces were withdrawn. Andrews was initially buried at KB Mission. In early December, his remains were reinterred at the Milne Bay War Cemetery. After the war, his remains were relocated to Port Moresby's Bomana War Cemetery. He was 28 years old. Following Gordon's death, Eleanor enlisted in the Australian Women's Army Service and served in South Australia until the war's end as an anti-aircraft gunner. In January 1943, Davidson family received the news that Ted had been severely wounded during the Battle of Sanandana. He was evacuated to the 2nd 4th Australian General Hospital in Ipswich, where he died of his wounds on the 6th of February 1943. He was 29 years old. Their names are listed on the roll of honour to my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of Private Gordon Andrews is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Gordon Norman Andrews, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director and staff, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.